Sometimes I just need a feel-good movie, so I decided to check out the Italian Netflix film, My Brother, My Sister. Did I end up with some good feels, or did it leave me sadder than when I started? When their father's will forces them to live together, two siblings try to overcome their differences to become a family. We meet Tesla and her two children at a funeral when her brother Nick comes on the scene. Now, instantly we can tell that he's the outsider, possibly one who's been estranged for some time. As part of the inheritance from their father, Nick and Tesla must live together for a year in order to gain the full inheritance, and neither of them likes that requirement. This has a fairly predictable story arc to it. We know that because the two siblings are semi-opposites and they haven't spoken for quite a while, there's going to be all kinds of tension between them. It's also fairly easy to tell that there will be growth experienced by the characters, so that they can all see their shortcomings and learn to work through them to become better people and family members. This predictability didn't bother me in the story because the characters themselves were kind of fun. Now, Nick is the laid-back, devil-may-care, almost slacker type of person. He's not really in an arrested development situation. He's just not concerned with some of the everyday stressors that consume other people. Tesla, on the other hand, is high-strung and filled with anxiety. Now, some of that is for good reason, because her son has some mental illness that requires her to provide close monitoring. And she's a single mom who's juggling a lot in her life, and she just doesn't have the luxury to be as unconcerned with everything as Nick seemingly is. As expected, Nick and Tesla clash on just about every level. The actors create convincing characters who each alternate between sympathetic and annoying. And the tension that comes from all of their interactions does create some decent drama, but also allows for conversations and situations that are going to lead to the characters' growth. Now, as part of Nick's story arc, there are a few trips that he takes to the beach because he's a kite surfer. Now, I'm curious if the director of this is really into kite surfing, because there are a few extended scenes that feature the sport. Now, they're well shot and they're beautiful to look at, but the longer they went on, the more out of place they felt in the story. And I think those scenes were meant to show us the solitude and peace that Nick experiences when he's doing what he loves, but it never really translated for me. I'm just making that assumption as to why the long shots may have been included in the film. There's also another sequence where we're watching a sort of montage take place for different characters, all while some singer is performing. Now, the scenes kept cutting back and forth between the singer and then a few of the different characters who are in their own scenes. It felt odd, and I kept waiting for some convergence, but it never happened. And the song was fine too, just the whole execution of that portion was odd, which kind of broke me out of the narrative because I was trying to figure out what the point of the back and forth was. Now, for the growth of our characters, Nick needs to grow up a bit and take on more responsibility, while Tesla needs to trust a little more and learn to let go just a bit. And the story provides multiple avenues for our characters to experience these, and the progression feels real in the fact that they don't always learn and the progress isn't immediate. There's a lot of back and forth, successes mixed with failures, and the story uses these to help keep it pretty grounded. Now, I thought this would be more humorous than it actually turned out to be. There are some funny moments, or at least some setups that made me chuckle, but it's just not as lighthearted as I thought it would end up being. But this doesn't sit in sadness and melancholy. There is stress and anxiety that transfers from the characters through the screen, but it also doesn't create a depressing tone. The overall feeling is one that leans more towards the happy than the sad when all is said and done. Now, I mentioned that Tesla's son Seb has some mental illness, and I'm glad that it never felt like the story was being disrespectful or flippant about it. And while it felt like Tesla may be overprotective at times, those around her and Seb treated him with compassion and understanding. And I especially like the interactions between Nick and Seb. Now, Nick, being an outsider who's not been around Seb, treats him just as he would treat anybody else. Now, sure, this causes grief with Tesla, but the conversations are loving and compassionate, even when they tread into the slightly bizarre. Now, as the film reaches its climax, the end of the story feels a bit manipulative. I found myself getting upset at how a scene was playing out, only to then go, okay. I mean, I think it was the intention to create a sense of closure and acceptance for characters, but at first, I wasn't on board with how the story was handling it. Overall, I did enjoy the character progressions and their interactions. Each actor created a sympathetic character, but not a pitiful one. They're flawed in various ways, creating opportunities to change and grow. And the story, while predictable in its arc, is still enjoyable because the scenarios are relatable and dynamic without becoming melodramatic or ridiculous. The tensions feel genuine, adding credibility to the narrative. While there were a few sequences that either felt gratuitous or out of place, the story as a whole worked well to show us a family learning to reconnect despite many obstacles. And when the film concludes, I'm left with a positive outlook rather than being left in a pit of despair. There's sex and nudity, some profanity, and only really one scene of violence. I give My Brother, My Sister 3.5 out of 5 couches. Have you seen any feel-good dramas lately? I'd love to find out what you watched in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.